Hey howdy everybody, and welcome to A Wild One. Yu-Gi-Oh! Ultimate Masters World Championship 2006, yeah that's right, that's the whole name, would be the final Yu-Gi-Oh! Game released on the Game Boy Advance. World Championships 2007 and 8 would release on the Nintendo DS, but here's the thing. I think these games are likely more interesting when paired directly together, rather than on their own. And if you stick with me to the end, I hope you'll see why. So you know what that means. We're getting a lot of gameplay discussion, a lot of discussion of the various states of the game physically, as well as, of course, many promotional cardboard game pieces. With that being said, GX is a weird time for this franchise, with not a ton of memorable shifts in design philosophy. The whole IP was trying to find where its new footing would take them after the end of the original show. Showrunners were excited about tailoring a story to a specific style of gameplay in the form of fusion summoning. The GX manga author was excited about being able to invent his own cards for his story, and the card game was experiencing a bit of an identity crisis. Printing sets with high-rarity anime cards no one was really interested in competitively, and printing individually powerful game pieces that would not begin to find their niche for a few years. Consequently, this leaves the video games in an interesting place. But first, we must talk about the cavalcade of cardboard you could acquire with sealed copies of these games. Trust me, these are really fun. The promo cards for Ultimate Masters were a fun novelty, coming with a 3-card set of Golden Homunculus, Helios the Primordial Sun, and Helios Duo Magistus. The most notable monsters here are the Helios monsters. Not only are they the premier monsters used by Amnail in the first season of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, Helios the Primordial Sun is also the monster you can special summon when you activate Macrocosmos, and that's technically why you're allowed to respond to it with Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. There's your fun piece of card game trivia. More interestingly though, Japan got a very special deluxe edition of this game that came with the game, the standard promos, a special box, a Yu-Gi-Oh! Online Dual Pass and Install CD, and one each of the recent structure decks, as well as 4 ultimate rare copies of the cover cards from those 4 structure decks. Those cards were Red Eyes Darkness Dragon, Vampire Genesis, Ocean Dragon Lord Neo Daedalus, and Infernal Flame Emperor. None of these cards were very good, but they are cool, especially as ultimate rares. World Championship 2007, however, is a bit of an upgrade in terms of card quality, coming with 3 cards: Spell Striker, Exploder Dragon, and Destiny Hero Disc Commander. This is probably the most impactful set of promos released in years. Spell Striker isn't much to write home about, but Exploder Dragon would become a rogue contender for a while with its ability to deal with hard-to-deal-with monsters, and Disc Commander would become the centerpiece of a deep draw deck at the highest levels of competition called Perfect Circle. They also released a V-Jump guide, which included a promo copy of Destiny Hero Plasma, or as he is known as the OCG, Destiny Hero Bloody. Given how much was changed to lower the overwhelming edge associated with Aster Phoenix's story from GX for the dub, I'm not surprised the name was changed to Plasma, but I do wish we got to keep Bloody. That is just so funny. World Championship 2008 came with 3 wild ones in the form of Deep Diver, Burden of the Mighty, and Dimensional Prison. Deep Diver isn't particularly notable other than stacking a monster when it's destroyed by battle, but Burden of the Mighty would see a lot of play in side decks as a means of countering tribute decks or decks that summoned large monsters. Dimensional Prison, I probably don't need to tell you, diligent viewer, was a staple trap card for many years, acting as a more powerful form of battle trap that would banish a monster instead of sending it to the graveyard. Interesting it got its debut here in a video game. No Harpy's Feather Duster, but definitely gets to hang out at the same parties. V-Jump published the guide for this game as well, and that came with a promo copy of Vortex Trooper, and he is a funny little guy. Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters Expert 2006, the final video game to bear the Duel Monsters title, was released in Japan on February 3rd, 2006. Yu-Gi-Oh! GX Ultimate Masters World Championship Tournament 2006 HD Remix Hyper Fighting Turbo 32X and Knuckles featuring Dante from the Devil May Cry series was released in North America on March 14th, 2006. This would be the first World Championship title released for the GX era and featured over 1,000 cards from the physical game up to Shadow of Infinity. This game made a few interesting decisions that we'll go over here in a bit, but this game definitely seemed more targeted at fans of the card game specifically, as opposed to people who were fans of the anime. But then again, it's a World Championship title. I suppose you could have just assumed that. So what do we do in this game? Well, we duel monsters. No anime characters are present here. Jaden on the box is basically false advertising. In fact, you even select a character portrait when you start a new game, and none of them look particularly like any character in the anime. There are 5 tiers of duelists, each of whom has a dedicated deck and strategy, and when you beat all of them, when you beat all of them at least once... God, this really is a Duel Monsters game, huh? Yes, after beating each duelist in a tier a set amount of times, you unlock the next tier until you reach the 5th tier. You can also unlock 2 modes where you have a mirror match, aka duel the deck you're using now, or duel from a selection of pre-saved decks. You unlock those by completing challenges. What are challenges, you ask? Glad you did. The game features multiple challenge types, which come in the form of duel puzzles, and theme duels, which are better, and survival duels. That's particularly excruciating. All of these challenge types award you points at the end of their completion, and when you amass a certain amount of points, you unlock new packs or even additional duelists for you to duel. Duel puzzles don't really need me to explain them to you, they're the same as they've always been, but theme duels are actually a little bit closer to one of the earlier World Championship games, where you have to build a deck in conjunction with a certain rule restriction, such as only one type, only one attribute, and you get to have a duel with an opponent who is conforming similarly. Survival duels, however, require you to duel as many times as you can, maintaining a cumulative life point total, beginning at 8,000 and going until you hit 0, or lose to another win condition. The duel screen itself is a beefed up and perfected version of the one found in GX Duel Academy. Interestingly, this game conforms to a number of forbidden and limited lists. Famously, one could use passwords to unlock additional options in the main menu to choose which ban list you want to use. This is a really cool feature for such a small scope game, and I'm glad people took the time to experiment with it. If only they would implement this in their big, expensive live service game they currently have. That'd be cool. The physical World Championship for this year was held in Akihabara, home to the gamers, on August 5th through 6th, 2006. The final match took place between a Chinese player and an Italian player on the most predictable strategies you can imagine: Chaos. The Italian player took first place with just about the most pure and standard Chaos list conceived of. It's basically just a good goat deck with cyber dragons in it. The second place went to the Chinese player on a slightly more interesting variant in Dark World Chaos, utilizing the new Dark World cards. It is worth noting at this point, Yu-Gi-Oh! Was defined by its powerful individual cards. There wasn't really inherent synergy to any of the individual game pieces, just things that happened to work well together, almost coincidentally. Dark World was one of the first successful entries into what we would call, these days, archetypes. Modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is made up of decks named for the archetypes found within them, and Dark World was largely the first time this theory of card design would find success. Archfiends are often referred to as the first archetype, or also Gravekeepers, but Dark World actually found competitive success. Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship 2007 was released in Japan on March 15th, 2007, and released in North America after a lengthy localization process at a significantly delayed March 20th, 2007. This game would utilize the play area and dual screen from Nightmare Troubadour, which makes sense as it is only the second game to exist on the platform. Why reinvent fire or the wheel? What this also meant was more hilarious 3-frame animations of monsters, and honestly, that alone makes it worth the price of admission. There's kind of not a lot to this game, but here are some of the new things we can discuss. 1, this saw the introduction of the same OC maker we would see throughout the remaining World Championship titles, allowing players to customize all aspects of their characters, such as hair, eyes, outfit, and dual disc. The game features over 1,600 cards and actually utilizes largely the same card pool and pack structure as you'll find in another game we will cover, Spirit Caller. This game has you square off against PNGs of monster cards in a decently fast simulator, which is important as cards are beginning to mature and become more interactive. Chains with multiple links by now have become much more common at every level of play. And that's kind of it. World Championship 2007 is definitely the middle child of the group here. I wish there was a little bit more to discuss, but we're going to be discussing it in the next game. So, on to the World Championship for real. The actual Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship for 2007 was held in San Diego, home to tourists mostly, and took place between July 28th and 29th in 2007. The deck breakdowns are a little more interesting here due to the various bans and restrictions on the previously successful strategies, as well as a general increase in power for a few individual game pieces as they came out. For instance, the deck that won the World Championship was Card Trooper Monarch, a strategy using some familiar faces but adding 3 new counterparts. Cyber Dragon, obviously, and then Card Trooper, which is half of the namesake of the deck, and also Monarchs began to be included in strategies as sticking Monarch cards to the board became easier and more reliable. The second place strategy, which Road of the King labels Machine, sought to use the same 3 powerful inclusions from the previous deck on top of Machine support cards, like Machine Duplication, which could get you 2 additional card troopers, and Limiter Removal to push for a 1-turn kill, or OTK. World Championship 2008 came out in Japan on November 29th, 2007, and in the United States on December 4th, 2007, with a worldwide release early in 2008. This game contains the entire available card pool up to and including Gladiator's Assault, minus some individual exceptions. This game takes place at an interesting time in Yu-Gi-Oh's history as a card game, but you sure wouldn't know that playing this game. In fact, this game is the reason I wanted to pair these 3 World Championship titles together. These 3 games all share a common theme, despite each of them bringing an individual new feature that would become a part of the World Championship formula going forward. All 3 of these games can be wrapped up in a single term: soulless. This title continues to drop dueling characters from the anime or manga, favoring dueling various PNGs of monster card art. Most of these card arts featured in the deck they use, but even that isn't always true. In 2008, we introduced the Duel World, where you can maneuver on the touchscreen and get a line of dialogue where they exclaim some nonsense and then run away, forcing you to find a different opponent. Suffice it to say, this mode mostly sucks. They even introduced structure deck battles in this game. Unfortunately, this means you don't start with one of the structure decks like in 2006. They have once again invented some fake packs for this game to choose from, and let me get just one final word in on this practice. It is fine when you do it for the roleplay adventure game since they're operating within their own world, even if it is a little frustrating that you don't know what cards might come from these packs. It is inexcusable to be inventing core packs for the World Championship games. Starting with 2007, they are advertised as the official software for that year's actual World Championship tournament. They are targeted at people who are familiar with the card game first and foremost. Why obfuscate what cards are where if you're targeting players who want to play the game competitively virtually? Clearly, Konami's general addiction to gambling and leveraging its IP for those purposes runs a little too deep. If you want players to take these games seriously, please take the players seriously in return. This game, like 2007 before it, uses the Nightmare Troubadour dual screen and deck building screen for ease of use, and for what it's worth, the speed of duels is generally pretty solid, considering you will, once again, be facing computer opponents on half-baked strategies to simulate difficulty. The physical World Championship for 2008 was held in Berlin, Germany, home of the Wiener Schnitzel, on August 9th through 10th in 2008. Now, obviously, the date disparity between game releases here is a little crazier, but I guess they just needed to put out 2 World Championship titles in 1 year. Don't blame me, I'm just a guy. This tournament was positively dominated by the coming paradigm shift for the card game as we knew it, Gladiator Beasts. We also saw strategies using the new Lightsworn cards, as well as burn stall strategies like Skill Drain and Gravekeeper, and even the first hint of an incoming meta warper, Dark Armed Dragon. The final match was a Gladiator Beast mirror, featuring new support released in Light of Destruction, namely Gladiator Beast Geyserus. The top 16 here were still using a lot of familiar faces and championship-winning decks from as early as 2004, but Yu-Gi-Oh! Is finally starting to find an identity that doesn't rely on the same powerful individual game pieces and a chaos engine. And from here on, Yu-Gi-Oh! Will begin to look a little different. There's a number of features that all 3 of these games share, such as the Ghost system, in which you can duel people who you fought on Wi-Fi or use them in a tag duel during the campaign mode. This system also generates the only known way to interact with one of the anime characters, which could be randomly dueled while playing in the LP survival mode. However, many of them are now lost to time as they were downloadable only and the Wi-Fi service for the DS has since been shut down. You may find some of what was described here today to be reductive, and unfortunately, that is largely correct. These games are paired together because they are essentially the same game 3 times. Sure, one has multiple ban lists, one of them has a vague world map with the slightest hint of progression and dialogue, and only one of them allows you to start with a deck that is of any use to you. But ultimately, these games allow you to duel monster PNGs with the personality of a conversation with an AI service, and collect from a set of cards that represents one of the lowest power card pools. And it doesn't just create a good gameplay experience. Today, if I speak from a retrospective outlook, as I have tried to for all these previous titles, these games represented a paradigm shift, where the games continued to get better, even if they were missing true mass appeal. I would love to hear about your times, dueling over the internet with 2007 and 8, and the tag duels you won with your friend's ghosts, because honestly, those are the interactions that really truly define these titles. Not Skull Servant setting a monster and passing. I just wish there was a better way to show that. World Championship titles 2006, 7, and 8 are a small pocket representing the general decline in Yu-Gi-Oh's mainstream notability. Of course, the game would maintain a sizable influence well into today, but this came at the cost of some of the worst cards released in Yu-Gi-Oh's history as they struggled to find a new direction for the game to go. World Championship 2008 features some of the cards that would define the competitive metagame in that year, the Gladiator Beasts, but you spend so much of that game buried in the past, you would be forgiven for not knowing this was even true. Gladiator's Assault, as well as the World Championship held in 2008, signaled the end of classic Yu-Gi-Oh! As everyone had known it. Decks would no longer have to be defined by chaos or other individual engines that combine into a win condition. Now, those things had a name, and that name was an archetype. But what comes next? You'll just have to wait to find out. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I'll see you in the next one.